Hi, welcome to the Rittners Floral School in Boston, Mass. I'm Dr. Steve Rittner, and it's a pleasure to welcome you into one of our classrooms today. We've got a very neat class for you. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Notice that we have quite a pedestal here. This is a pedestal of the Three Graces. It is one of these containers that's often used for parties, special events, special occasions. It has the look of something that is really old, but actually it isn't all that old, and it's a wonderful reproduction. We have a block of foam on the top, and we're about ready to go, and we're going to make something that's really neat that reflects the fall season. I'm going to start off with a little bit of my baker fern, and I'm going to be adding some of my foliage to this to begin with. I'm going to do a light greening. In other words, I'm taking some of my foliage, placing it on the top, and the back, and on the sides, and working it around. This is really just so that our mechanics will not be showing through, but we're going to be using a lot of flowers on this one so that even after we do this, even if we have a light greening, you're not going to see too much of the base by the time we finish this. And I'm working it on the top, the sides. I'll also make sure that I get a little bit over onto the other side of the design as well. So I'm placing my materials on here, doing a light greening. Baker fern is a very good foliage for this. It covers well, it covers fairly rapidly, and you'll notice with just a few pieces we've got something that is starting up and looks pretty interesting. Our materials today, we're going to use some pretty nice things. At this time of the year we have some of what we call the native hydrangea coming in. This stuff is absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's big, it's showy, it really works very well. And because it works so well, it is really appropriate for doing this kind of designing because we can get an enormous amount of coverage out of it. But before I add my hydrangea, I'm going to do something first and add just a little bit more foliage in. I happen to have some ivy, and I want to get my ivy in, and that is going to be something that if I get in now will make my life a little bit easier. So I have a few pieces that I'm going to work in here and then just kind of drip and droop it over the side. I may adjust this as I go along, but I think that life will be a little easier if I get this in first. So I'm taking a piece or two here, and I'm going to place it here, and then over here, and I'm going to take a quick look and maybe get one more piece kind of hanging over here. So I've got a few pieces of the ivy kind of dripping and drooping. Now I'm going to take some of my hydrangea and start working it in, and this stuff is just absolutely gorgeous. It's literally the kind of stuff that practically the design will practically make itself by itself, because notice how this is just going to fill space up so nicely for me. I'm taking some small pieces that I've already cut from the bush that I have here, and I'm just placing it a little here, there, and I think you can see it doesn't take a whole lot of this stuff to come up with a really pretty effect. So I'm taking it, gradually adding it in here, working my way around on this, and I have my infrastructure pretty ready to go. I'm going to work a few more pieces working towards the middle and also towards the back. This is going to be one-sided, although we could definitely make this design into a two-sided piece. It's not all that hard to do that on something like this. And I'm taking my pieces, working them around over onto the other side, and then I'm going to continue the process of filling in with some of my native hydrangea here. And you'll notice, my viewer, this is coming together fairly rapidly. Now it looks like it's very full, but I want to reassure you, I still have plenty of room to design on. In other words, I have space here, space here, space here. In other words, what we're doing is we're filling in on the top, and because of the size of the hydrangea, it feels like it is pretty much dense, but it really isn't. There is space in between these flowers, so I'll be able to get plenty of other things in here And that's exactly where I'm leading. So I've got some things coming worked on the top. Now let's start adding a few more things to our mix. And because it's the fall, I do want to get the feeling of fall in here. And so to me, one of the major things when we're talking fall is, of course, apples. And I have a couple of apples. I have them placed on heavy picks. I took pick, poked it in, and then I'm going to work it in here. I think that that adds a new dimension and a rather interesting kind of symbolism to our designing. And this is a big design. It's big and it's showy, and it's kind of nice to work something like that into the arrangement. Now, what other interesting things can we put in here? Well, we've got some other flowers that I want to play with on this design, and I think that we have so many pretty things that we can play with at this time of the year. Certainly we have our roses. You never can go wrong with roses. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my roses and work them over onto the side. I'm not going to make this perfectly symmetrical. I think that sometimes when you make something feel a little bit asymmetrical, they can be a little bit more interesting. And so you'll notice, my viewer, I'm taking some of my roses and I'm just gradually working it over onto this side of the design. So it's kind of dripping down a little bit. Now I want to come up with something that has a similar kind of an effect onto the other side. So I'm going to place another rose right here. And I'm using some nice big open roses, you'll notice. And I'm going to place another one extending out a little bit beyond over onto the other side. So notice, my viewer, excuse me, as I'm placing these, I've got several right over here and then several coming down over there. 2 on one side, 3 on the other. So it almost feels like it's dribbling down from the left over towards the right. It gives us a nice kind of gentle flow to the design. Now let's see, what other interesting things can we do in this? Well, I like the yellow roses. Let's play with some orange ones. And I have some lovely, lovely orange roses that are also available at this time of the year. And I'm going to work it in as well. I'm going to place one in right there, in towards the front. I'm going to place another one a little bit towards the back, right up here, just beyond where my apple happens to be. And that gives a nice, interesting effect. Now, what other things can we do on this? Oh, yes, of course. I'm looking at my design bench. One of my favorite flowers. Sunflowers. You can't go wrong with them. They're bold, they're beautiful. They give a really, really cool effect to our designing. I'm going to work a few of my sunflowers into this design. And I think, my viewer, you can see that this is giving us a really, really neat kind of effect to our unit, because it's sunny, it's bold, and it works very, very nicely. So I'm going to place another one over here. Notice one over on that side. I'm going to work another one, placing it over towards the middle. So I think you can see, my viewer, this is coming out very, very nicely, and it's giving me a really, really pretty effect. It's big, it's showy, it's beautiful, and notice how that's developing very, very nicely. I have a few more things on my design bench, and I'm just looking through some of the flowers that I have available to play with. There's one flower that a lot of people sometimes overlook, or they poo-poo it because it's an everyday flower, but let's not forget our carnation. Sometimes we can get some very, very nice results from carnations. And because I have a couple of orange carnations on my design bench, I'm going to make use of them. It's a big flower. It has a huge range of different colors. And in my opinion, this is one that is too often overlooked, because it is something that is colorful, it fills space well, and it's reasonable in terms of price. So I think it's something that's worth mixing in, because it works nicely. Now I could stop at this point if I wanted on this design, but wait, there's more. We could stop and leave it at this point, but I want to show you how you can do something else that's kind of cool. I'm going to take some of another flower that I happen to have. It's one of my favorite flowers. Of course, my students tease me. They say, Dr. Steve, every flower is your favorite flower. And that's kind of true. But the bottom line is that we can come up with some cool effects. So far, we've got a lot of things that are pretty much face materials here. Things like the sunflowers, the roses, the carnations, even the hydrangea are kind of roundy. Let's play with something in terms of a little difference in terms of shape. One of the things that you can sometimes do on your designing is take things that are linear and mix the linear elements in with your round things and come up with some cool effects. So I'm taking here some of my larkspur, and notice that by adding the larkspur, it's going to make my design feel bigger, it's going to feel larger, and it's going to add a different kind of an element to the design. Sometimes this kind of contrast can work very, very well for you. And notice, my viewer, as I'm working this in here, it's making the design feel better. Now, you might look at it and say, well, you know, I kind of liked it the other way. I don't want it with the larkspur. And that's perfectly okay. The idea is I'm giving you options on this, my viewer, that you can kind of take or leave, use or not as you desire. But I think you can see it's giving the design a little bit more length. It's making it feel bigger. It's adding a little contrast in color to the design. It's making it feel different. And that's the whole idea. In other words, I'm trying to show you another option that you can do that can make this design feel a little bit bigger, a little bit different, and also give us a contrast with the yellows and the oranges and things like that. And by doing so, come up with something that visually is rather interesting. So notice what I'm doing, my viewer. I'm taking some pieces of my larkspur. I worked them coming around here, and now I'm working also one here. I'm going to get one in over here. In other words, I'm working them in through the center and into the bottom part of the design. And I think that you'll see that by doing that, that's going to give me a different effect. Overall, these kinds of designs are big, they're showy, they certainly are not inexpensive. These are fairly elaborate pieces, but I think that they are some of the most fun types of designing that you can do. These things work well in entry areas, they can work well in bay windows. They're great for parties and functions. If you're trying to create a design that really looks great for an event or something where it's a very, very special kind of time, certainly the ability to come up with things like this will enable you to come up with things that will impress people, and certainly if you're monetizing this, to make money from your efforts. What do you think, my viewer? Isn't that beautiful? At Rittners Floral School, we believe that floral designing should be quick, easy, and fun. And I think you can see, my viewer, this is not a teeny tiny design. This is fairly elaborate, and yet the process of creating this was fairly easy. Again, you need a very tall container, something that's basically like a riser. Something like this starts it, working some foliage on it, some things dripping and drooping down, using the hydrangea as the main course on this to fill up space, to bulk it up. A novelty factor, such as our apples, which are perfect at this time of the year, because when we look at apples, we automatically think in terms of fall season. So we have our apples in place here, and then the use of yellows and oranges, such as our sunflowers, our roses, to work into this design. And we could stop at that point, but the adding of the larkspur that gives us contrast in shape as well as color between the coolness of the blue and the yellows and oranges and reds and the neutral greens, that really helps us come up with a very, very interesting effect. I hope, my viewer, that you enjoyed this presentation. I sure as heck enjoyed presenting it to you. Again, a beautiful design for fall. Thank you for coming in and visiting us today.